the worst off, because there are no, only recently, since 7th August 1990, there have been some positive affirmation. That is only in the jobs. Mandal Commission was not implemented, just in government jobs there was reservation, whereas other related issues like land reforms and education, those things were not catered to. So in social justice, we have to scrutinize the Mandal Commission recommendations and other aspirations in whole lot of social charters which come in different forms, and they should become part of the discourse. And usually in our circle, our meaning the think tanks, the NGOs, the media, the empowering description is from borrowed categories of INGOs, like self-determination. Self-determination is globally accepted term, but what it means in this context is not, it doesn't mean same thing to all people. So should we not bring in our own issues like caste annihilation and those issues of dignity in social justice issue, because social justice is not just economic justice, is also issues of dignity. At that point, how it comes, maybe we need a separate thing. The other is, it was very surprising in all the manifestos on agriculture, there is a specificity of agriculture in the fragile zones, fragile ecological zones, the deserts and especially the mountain Himalaya agriculture. That does not find it. And third is the majority, one, they are small landholders, second, both are around 60%, rain-fed agriculture or dry land agriculture. Those problems are also different, and whole discourse almost seems to be focusing on the green revolution areas, on the irrigated areas, and the those are not discussed. And the last related point in this agriculture social justice is that there are knowledge systems associated like this traditional midwives or seed savers or soil, those who are experts of different varieties of vegetable and flower growing. So now those knowledge systems have to be respected, because they are associated with OBC and Dalit communities. So that issue of dignity, how will it be sorted out, I am not very clear, but that's a big issue. And there are no modern facilities available where these people are still serving. So, and secondly, the understanding of peasants about nature, about weather, is much more profound than our trained BSc and MScs in agriculture about soil and about weather. So that knowledge is neither respected nor valued. So in our education system, how the local environmental education should become part, and because and the skills which we already have, how to upgrade them, how to if there is need for standardization. So those issues have to come in when we talk about agriculture. And the rural urban, when we talk about rural, gaon ki baat, then the what those disparities between this famous government or World Bank backed program is urban facilities to the rural areas. Now what those facilities, those things also have to be deconstructed, and our manifestos and our policy planners are totally not interested in that. The other comment was that Asim Bhai gave both general remarks but very specific on global financial capital and all, which hopefully you and Gopa would also bring in at some stage. Maybe this is the right time because Asim is planning to leave. So if I could request the chair to bring it could be if Asim could stay, then after social justice issues and Adivasi, then that should be done. The last point about the agriculture was that Adivasi agriculture and Adivasi understanding of forest science is also very profound, and is one, it is not recognized by rest of the society. So how that those spaces have to become autonomous, and how they are linked with their not just livelihoods but culture and identity. So that's a kind of package, and I don't know how to reimagine our global economy in that, locate the national economy and still have the a dignified space for Adivasi worldview and Adivasi Jivancharya, their life and their rhythm, without romanticizing and without displaying our technocidal and genocidal tendencies towards Adivasis, which we are now fast emulating the Americas, especially the North America, in trying to not just displacement but the kind of physical annihilation of Adivasis is taking place. So when we talk about agriculture or rural areas, Adivasi specificities are never discussed, and it is so-called mainstream thinkers on these issues. They have to bring in, whether they are on economy or on agriculture or on climate justice, issues of Adivasis also have to be specifically brought in the discourse.
एक्चुअली जो हमारी संस्था है या हम लोग जो काम करते हैं वो ग्रामीण स्तर पर काम करते हैं, तो मुझे लगता है कि ग्रामीणों के साथ हम बैठ करके जब ये मैनिफेस्टो वगैरह की बात करते हैं तो वो उनको ये बिल्कुल बात जो है उनके दिमाग में नहीं आती। वो ये जानते हैं कि वोट किसको देना है, कैसे प्रभावित होता है, ये इस चीज़ को तो भली भांति जानते हैं, लेकिन मैनिफेस्टो के आधार पर यदि कोई ग्रामीण स्तर पर वोट करता है ये मुझे नहीं लगता। इसलिए मुझे लगता है कि ये जो मैनिफेस्टो वगैरह बनाते हैं, कोई पार्टियां मैनिफेस्टो अपना रखती हैं तो इसके बारे में इतने गंभीर नहीं है। इसीलिए वो इतने गंभीर नहीं है क्योंकि ग्रामीण स्तर में जो वोट दिया जाता है उनका मुख्य इंटरेस्ट जो है वोट लेना है, तो वोट जो दिया जाता है वो मैनिफेस्टो का आधार पर नहीं दिया जाता है। एक तो ये चीज़ है, और दूसरी बात मैं ये कहना चाह रहा था कि जो अभी हमने जितनी भी चर्चाएं की हैं, बहुत महत्वपूर्ण चर्चाएं की हैं, इनको हम आगे ले जाने के लिए किस तरह का आधार बनाएंगे या किस तरह का कार्यक्रम बनाएंगे, ये भी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। क्योंकि आगे किस प्रकार की सरकार आती है, कौन आता है सरकार में, क्या है, उसके साथ ये इसकी ये जो हमने डिस्कस किया है ये चर्चा करनी है, या अभी थोड़ा यदि हमारे पास जो थोड़ा बहुत जो समय है, जैसे उत्तराखंड में चुनाव जो 7 मई को होने वाले हैं, तो उससे पहले यदि ये जो हमने चर्चा की है, यदि वहाँ पे जो भावी जो उम्मीदवार हैं, यदि उनके साथ किस तरह के हम एक संवाद जो है विकसित करते हैं, संवाद डायलॉग लेते हैं, तो वो भी एक चीज़ हो सकती है। उससे जो वहाँ के उम्मीदवार हैं वो पहले से ही हमारी इन सारी एक्सरसाइज में भी जो हम लोगों के साथ जुड़े हुए थे, तो उनके साथ भी ये सारा चीज़ ली जा सकती है। और दूसरा, जैसे विजय भाई ने ये कहा है कि हमारा जलवायु परिवर्तन वगैरह के जो इतने दिनों से हम एक्सरसाइज कर रहे हैं, इतना हमने कार्यशालाएँ की हैं, सब कुछ किए हैं, लेकिन यहाँ जलवायु परिवर्तन के लिए किसी भी कभी मैनिफेस्टो ने इतनी गंभीरता नहीं दिखाई। जब उत्तराखंड में तो कम से कम इतनी बड़ी आपदा आई है जलवायु को ही लेकर के, वो सारी चीज़ें वो भी इसमें जुड़ना चाहिए मुझे लगता है। और दूसरा जो है, जैसे चाइल्ड लेबर के ऊपर बाल श्रम को लेकर के भी हम काम करते हैं, बाल श्रम के मुद्दे भी इसमें बहुत हैं। तो ये 2 महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दे जो हैं, इनको किस तरह से जोड़ा जाए, ये इसमें
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद फॉर यू वेरी हेल्पफुल कमेंट्स।
गोपाल Arupa will talk about the global issues, but from the discussion that happened, it's very clear that there's complete neglect of the agriculture sector. And I don't mean just in a superficial way that agriculture growth, but turning the whole discussion on its head from what Asim said about how they are visualizing that people will come out of agriculture sector to industry services, but then who will feed people? And from Dunuji's discussion of how natural resources or human and natural resources based in our rural areas are first extracted, and then they are supposed to feed into growth, which will apparently percolate down again to the people, and to the whole models of agricultural growth and productivity and land rights and all these issues. But it's true that, and it's not just this election or these manifestos. For years now, agriculture has completely dropped out of the discussion. So I would really, and what you both also said, ki how do we strategize uske baare mein, ki why has it become so important in the political discourse, and what is it that, what would be our view of agriculture that would actually kind of solve, and give us long-term sustainable solutions and which are people oriented. So I think we really need a strategy session where elections will be over soon, and how do we take some of these critical issues at least forward and put them back on the agenda. And then I had a small question for Professor Saxena. Your issue that the BJP used talking about this land use policy, it's very, very interesting. And you said that it's good, but that it also needs to be binding, that political parties or governments do not discard it, but also how the criteria goes in of what, that you mentioned about biodiversity, and that we need to ensure that these are there in the criteria of, what is actually agricultural land and what land cannot be played around with for industrialization. So how do we put in, how do we deepen that discussion and ensure that even if it's a land use policy, it's a land use policy which actually does what it's supposed to do and does it well. So I would look forward to your further kind of ideas on that.
Thank you. Yeah.
It has been said by I think 2-3 people that manifestos are really not used, and people don't. भंडारी जी बोल रहे थे manifesto को basis पर वोट नहीं मांगा जाता है. मुझे लगता है इसमें थोड़ा सा समझ का जरूरत है. आज the way the mainstream political parties are going to people are based on demands which are there in the manifestos. आज जो मोदी का जो चल रहा है, जो मोदी सरकार होने से ये बचाएगा, गुजरात का मॉडल में ये डेवलपमेंट करेगा, एवरीथिंग इज देयर इन द मैनिफेस्टोस. हम 100 शहर बनाएंगे, हम इतना इंडस्ट्रिएशन कर देंगे, तो ये आइडिया गलत है. जो मैनिफेस्टो का आधार पर वोट नहीं मांगा जाता. जितनी बेसिस पर वोट मांगा जा रहा है वो मैनिफेस्टोस में है. ऐसा बात सही है कि पूरा मैनिफेस्टो लेके लोगों के पास नहीं जा रहा है, लेकिन ईच एंड एवरी पॉइंट दे आर आस्किंग देयर वोट्स फॉर पीपल, एंड एज पर पब्लिक परसेप्शन the people are inclined to accept that model. This is based on their claims which are all there in the manifestos. So manifestos are basically collection of all that, not that people are reading the entire manifesto. That needs to be corrected. In that the importance is very clear.
Yeah. Always, please. We have lost.
एक छोटा सा कमेंट, मुझे लगता था कि वो आ जाएगा पर वो नहीं आया, तो मुझे बोलना पड़ रहा है. जो रिहाई मंच जो लखनऊ में है और इलाहाबाद में, उसकी तरफ से एक जो है पीपल्स मैनिफेस्टो की एक डिमांड आई है. वो किसी पार्टी ने भी वो उस इशू को नहीं उठाया है. जो पार्लियामेंट्री डेमोक्रेसी में जितनी भी एक्टिव पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज हैं और सिविल सोसाइटी ग्रुप्स ने भी किसी ने उसको जो है इतना रेडिकली या प्रोग्रेसिवली जो है उठाई नहीं है कि हमारे जो इंटरनल इंटेलिजेंस सर्विसेज हैं उनको कैसे जो इंस्टीट्यूशंस हैं, पार्लियामेंट्री इंस्टीट्यूशंस, पार्लियामेंट के जो है के लिए के सामने जो है अकाउंटेबल बनाया जाए. मैं कुछ लोग सोचेंगे कि माइनॉरिटीज़ वाला, पर माइनॉरिटीज़ के अलावा जो अदर ऑप्रेस ग्रुप हैं, आदिवासीज़ का जैसे बात की, तो मैं ऐसे कुछ लोगों को जानता हूँ जो लोग जो है मध्य प्रदेश में गए आदिवासी इशू पे, किसानी के इशूज़ पे रिसर्च करने के लिए, और उन रिसर्चर्स को जो है उठा लिया गया, कई दिन तक डिटेन किया गया, और उनके पास होम मिनिस्ट्री एंड लोकल मध्य प्रदेश सरकार की जो होम मिनिस्ट्री और जो सेंट्रल होम मिनिस्ट्री और डीएम, उनकी परमिशन लेटर्स थे, उसके बावजूद उन्हें डिटेन किया गया. तो बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट इशू है कि आप टेरराइज ना करें.
ठीक है, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. I request Asim Bhai and Professor Saxena to give your comments in the light of comments which have been made. and please be brief because we have lots of time.
First question raised was about the mandrakes. I said that BJP's manifesto, which talks about linking mandrakes to agriculture, which is a very vague formulation, has some very grave undertones. And I assume that what they mean is that the farmers, agricultural laborers who work on owners' farm would be paid under mandrakes. And if this is the assumption, if this assumption is correct, then it is very dangerous because agricultural laborers are linked to landowners in a very unequal and oppressive power structure. They don't get minimum wages, they don't get dignified treatment, and they are, oppressed in many other ways. Mandrakes has provided a space where they can get themselves delinked from farmers' control and earn a dignified way, even though it's less than minimum wage. And documents and researches across the country have pointed out that this has given them considerable freedom and also, autonomy. So therefore, if we again try to link mandrakes with agriculture in this manner, then they would be again dependent upon the farmers, even for earning this dignified wage which is in public space. So we may adopt 1,000 different strategies to help farmers, subsidize inputs and whatever, but not this. Public programs of employment, wage employment, must not be integrated with private employment. This is the point number 1. Number 2 point was that no party has talked of agricultural development as per agroecological zones, whether it is forest ecology, whether it is coastal ecology, whether it is mountain ecology, and so on and so forth. Each ecological zone has a very specific problem, both of technology as well as input use and many other things. They have talked in general terms, and they have tried to summarize farmers' problems in terms of 2 or 3 things. Number 1, farming is unviable. The farmers are committing suicide, and farming is unviable because input prices are high, trade is not available, and they get very low return. This is broadly, the some of the problems that they devise. And agricultural development is in the process of low growth because high yielding technologies have reached the plateau, and that kind of research is not available. And generally, whatever researches are now coming is in private domain, and therefore it is very expensive for farmers to reach it. But if we try to look into different agroecological zones and their problems, we find, particularly in the concept of the desert technology and mountain ecology and forest ecology, is that this chemical intensive fertilizer which has been pursued and patronized by the country and still continues to do so, is absolutely lethal, for these areas. And until we get away from this kind of, policy paradigm, we will not be able to help, the farming agroecologically. Although all parties are talking of organic farming, but they are talking of organic farming within this general paradigm of a standardized agricultural technology, not in the context of agroecology. So therefore, if we have to talk in terms of farmers' problem specific to different agricultural zones, agroecological zones, then the problem would be very different from one zone to another. And then it will require also different things. But by and large, I would say that whether it is forest ecology, or it is mountain ecology, or it is tribal agriculture, there chemical intensive fertilizer is no go. And what we should promote is agriculture which is both sound agroecologically as well as for farmers' point of view. What is in very broad term called organic farming, non-chemical intensive agricultural technology. In order that this kind of technology is promoted, again you will have to rely upon public research institutions which must focus on how to increase yields, without the use of this kind of chemical intensive fertilizer. And this must be. And secondly, as far as tribal areas, tribal farmers are concerned, tribal farmers, even agricultural land are dependent upon forest ecology. And the forests are destroyed, these lands are also affected. They are affected both because of industrial pollution as well as because of the many inputs they get from forest area. So therefore, until you try to save forests for them, not merely their agriculture but their entire survival is threatened. Third thing is knowledge systems. Vijay Pratap ji was talking about knowledge system. See, this is a part of the colonial heritage. Colonization results in many long-term impacts. And one of them is that all kind of indigenous knowledge systems are devalued, and the colonizers try to impose their value systems, and then they get internalized, and even the elite in the colonies, even after independence, they try to accept it. Over a period of time, indigenous knowledge system has been devalued, and in order to resurrect traditional knowledge system, very fundamental changes would have to take place. Some little efforts are being made now at least, and governments have not even taken steps to document many of the traditional knowledge systems in order to protect their intellectual property rights. What is happening is that a lot of piracy of traditional knowledge is taking place. Corporates are not merely pirating traditional knowledge, they are also pirating traditional biodiversity, and then you try to patent it and give it back on expensive terms. Now, if you try to link all these problems, you again will have to go back to the globalized economic growth and exposure to all this kind of obnoxious forces. So therefore, you cannot pursue many of these things in a systematic manner, in an autonomous manner, unless you question the whole paradigm of globalized economic growth. And lastly, somebody was talking about the land use policy. Land use policy has not been talked about for the first time. Actually, if somebody recalls that in the early 50s and in the early 60s, there used to be land use boards whose function was precisely to implement a land use policy. But you will be shocked to know that those land use boards were never functional. And eventually after 20, 30 years they were wound up. The reason was that whenever the pressures came on the government, they never bothered about the land use board and they went ahead with their own decision. Till before 1990, in the revenue laws and the revenue regulation, there was a provision that before you try to change the use of land from agriculture to non-agriculture, you have to seek a specific permission from the revenue officer. And that permission was not easily given. Even sometimes, in order to turn a part of your land into bricklane making for personal use, not for commercial use, which is now happening, even that was very difficult. But after 1990, floodgates opened, and permission used to be given in no time. So therefore, the point I was trying to raise is that it depends upon the degree of commitment of a government to enforce a land use policy. If the commitment is not there, institutions will not work. And if the commitment is there, even without institutions, government can be very serious in enforcing it.
Thank you very much, Asim bhai.
I think the only thing I will say is there is a desperate need for strategic thinking and the preparation of a full-scale alternative vision, which should be an ongoing process, which should involve people at the other end of the social spectrum, people who are actually the inheritors of this country and the working people of this land, This process has to somehow get gotten into a national sort of visibility. For that, an organization like SEDED is actually ideally placed, and you should actually initiate dialogues like that and then bring them into the mainstream of public discussion. I mean, for instance, even quite apart from global things, let's assume for a minute that India was not globalized. You would still have very serious problems given the development model. And there are larger forces working within India which are causing those problems with the development model. So what is our analysis of that? That structure should be presented in simple terms before the people, and people should be called upon to discuss that. And one of the problems with an age like ours, which is impatient about solutions, and this is the main problem with the AAP party, for instance, is that the default ideology is solutionism. You start looking for solutions without understanding the problem, which means you typically solve the wrong problem if you ever solve anything. So the patience to actually grasp the problems in their interrelated totality, that has to be found. I mean, things are very urgent, but at the same time you need patience to do that, to develop that understanding. And then once you have a holistic approach, then I think problems can be solved from the right angle, by the right people. And I mean, I think that the challenge is to embarrass the parties. AAP was beginning to do that when it lost the plot completely. So I think that one needs, for instance, an alternative model of industrialization. For lack of a better word, we should use that word with the caveat that industrialization here on has to be low on resource intensity, low on energy intensity, high on renewable energy, etc. I mean, all those provisos which are easily said, but when you get down to it, they're not easily done at all. The idea of regional grids, the idea of local generation, co-generation, etc. I mean, there's a whole set of issues which need to be streamlined simultaneously, and a whole vision needs to be prepared such that if any party is interested, they can pick up from there and take it into parliament or whatever. The problems, as I understand it, are actually deeper, and Professor Saxena hinted at them. I personally feel that actually colonialism never ended. The illusion has been that, since 1947 we have been independent. But if you read, for instance, Nehru writing to Indira Gandhi, I mean, when he's writing to his daughter from Ahmednagar jail, he has to tell her the truth. So he's writing one letter which is called The Invisible Empire of America. And it's very clear. I mean, it's one of the best things that Nehru ever wrote. He prophesies globalization. He sees exactly how the new kinds of conquests are going to happen, and he outlines in 5 or 6 pages what forms it's going to take. So that understanding needs to be brought back. And there's dreams and dreams that, for instance, Rabindranath Tagore wrote in the 1910s and 20s on very similar issues, criticizing nationalism and so on. All that discourse has to be brought back. The issues which Gandhi raises in Hind Swaraj, controversial they might be, but they have to be brought back into discussion. I mean, at this point of time, the sad truth is that there is no space in this country for the father of the nation. Okay? So, I mean, I suggested to the AAP people, why not adopt a stance whereby you say to the public that you have a choice between voting for Gandhi's assassins, voting for Gandhi's traitors, and voting for Gandhi's followers. Those are your 3 options. But of course, they wouldn't do that. So, if a party like AAP does not have the courage to actually take on a simple position like that and say that they are Gandhian constitutionalists, ideologically speaking, that they are going to defend the constitution and promote Gandhian values, at least the directive principles of state policy in the constitution and so on. They are squeamish about pushing that to the hilt. Why? This is the question. Why do they chicken out when they actually have the mainstream parties, fumbling for the first time? So there is a lot of thinking to be done strategically, and a whole vision needs to be put forward over a period of time. and which places agriculture at the very heart of things. I mean, people say there's no money in agriculture. It wasn't always true. And how come money returns to agriculture the moment an agribusiness firm enters it? You know, so how come the same land starts yielding high returns to big corporations, but doesn't yield returns to small farmers? The systematic trend around the world has been to try to break down smallholder agriculture and make room for agribusiness. And behind it are much bigger interests, for instance, the chemical industry, the pesticides and so on, the war-based industries which refused to go back once they rose to power in the First and Second World War. All those industries get their markets by selling chemicalized food, by other industries selling chemicalized food. Our elites typically have a totally uncritical stance about all this. They don't care that their children get diabetes or get early cancer. None of that seems to bother our educated elites. Okay? So a whole critique has to be built which is global in scope and addresses all the problems here in an interconnected way. Once we have the overall understanding right, I think then one can start proposing answers instead of just staying with questions.
Thank you very much, Asim Bhai. On that note, we bid a goodbye to Asim Bhai and Professor K.P. Saxena. They have to leave for some other urgent work. Thank you so very much for your inputs and presence. And at the end of the meeting, we also hope to discuss that what we should try to do next to extend our engagement to post-electoral scenario and post-government formation scenarios. So we will definitely get back to you on this and seek your advice and guidance on this. Thank you so very much. A big thank you also to the other speakers who have been on the panel since morning. And it's like a batsman being padded for the entire day. So thanks to Gopa, Abhay Dada, also Rituji. Prakash, I will also request you to come here. And if somebody can see them off, that would be good. Now we begin with Soumyaji. And I'll request all the speakers to limit your input to say 15 to 18 minutes. Thank you.
That they mismanage time. And this is always happening in many meetings that because in the beginning keeps speaking, talking and ultimately the
We can only limit what has happened, but try to do better in future.
Because this is repeatedly happening. And I really feel little discouraged to speak with. In any case, I have given a very detailed paper. And I think if you have any comments on that, we'll be happy to get because whether I'm needed to actually speak on this, I don't know. I feel very bad about total mismanagement about we talk about equity, we talk about this, our actions don't show this.
No, I understand. We are extremely sorry for
Very
the
mismanagement, very
bad time management.
not only time management, not putting thoughts on what you have to do. This is hardly 10 people sitting.
Can we also request all of you to come to the details if that is not inconvenient for all of you? Yeah.
I think I have supplement to the paper, you can read and you can have
Can you have give you a small overview of that? Will that be okay?
I don't feel very bad. So I will not.
Okay. ऋतु जी आपसे रिक्वेस्ट है हेल्थ पब्लिक हेल्थ पे फोकस है थोड़ा कांग्रेस के मैनिफेस्टो में भी बीजेपी में भी तो आप उसमें
मैंने नोट सर्कुलेट नहीं किया है मैं मैनिफेस्टो चालू देखे मैंने जो सौम्या जी ने दिए हैं जिसमें कांग्रेस का बीजेपी का आपका सीपीएम का और उसको स्वास्थ्य के मुद्दों को देखने के लिए मैंने कहा किस नज़र से देखा जाए। एक तो सब यूनिवर्सल एक्सेस की बात करेंगे, सब पब्लिक सिस्टम स्ट्रेंथनिंग की करेंगे, मगर मुझे लगता है अगर हम जो असीम अभी कह रहे थे ऑल्टरनेट डिस्कोर्स, ऑल्टरनेट मॉडल की तरफ बढ़ने की बात करनी है, then one thing that we've been arguing with several groups कि जो economism है which is how we see development in the last 200 years And that's the only view that we have in health, and other things become welfare at the end of the story. Uske bajaye, the center point is environmental and human health. And the rest of it, whether it is economy or agriculture or town planning or village planning or water management, is centered around that. That's a different way of turning the discourse, development discourse around. तो उस नजर से कि मैनिफेस्टोज में हेल्थ को कहाँ रखा गया और कितनी जगह दी गई, was one of the issues. The other is that all our discourse today and the most progressive discourse has gone around rights approaches, and we've got a whole lot of rights legislation. But uska asar kya ho raha hai, I'm not very sure. It has its positives, but I think in a lot of ways it's been very regressive also. The right to food bill is actually taken away rather than actually given anything in the concrete. So we sort of at one level, and it's been one of the most successful campaigns. Yet that's the story. So what one sees in that really is that we're moving towards a situation where there's state largesse, and that's the way the welfare state functions. There is no capacity building of the common person, there is only capacity building of the corporates and so on at this point of time. So in all spheres can we look at empowerment and capacity building of people, including strengthening their own knowledge and their own capacity to deal with the issues. At the same time, one recognizes that disempowerment has been so much by now that you need to have a rights approach and you need to have rights which are responsibilities of the state. But if that's the only way that the state, we want the state to deliver, then that's not going to work. So that's the other dimension from which I've been looking at health. And so if one looks at the place of health within these four, International Congress, and we've heard Sonia Gandhi on all these things talking about right to healthcare as being one of the first things that is being given. In AAP, it's in place immediately after Swaraj, you have education and health. So that again is a change from the conventional way in which health and education come in. You have a very standard way of economics, then the various sectors of agriculture, industry, and so on, and then you have the social sectors in a sense. Now it's very much higher up. And there is much more space to health for various reasons, but INC and AAP have put it much higher. BJP and the CPM manifesto in the order of things both have it much lower, but the space and the kind, and both have substantive sections, and they have very specific formulations of what they will go about doing. So then looking at what are the specifics of what they are proposing. If one looks at the policy framework of Indian National Congress, for example, then the whole focus one is on rights legislation, to the extent that while this is number one legislation of the new ones they are proposing, but the whole framework of rights is to say that this is the way to make 2/3 of our people middle class, and actually makes that statement, which is such a meaningless statement and ridiculous statement to make, as if these rights legislation are going to move people up from one level class to another. That's not what they can do in any way at all, but that's the frame. Second is the whole focus on technologies. So technology today means IT. It doesn't mean health technology necessarily. It means how you will use IT for health. So that is one, and therefore, and the Aadhaar card comes in there, the better governance, and therefore health access will improve, that kind of thing. The other is vaccines. That's a big story, and all the successes have been, so polio we've eliminated, therefore vaccines becomes an issue. HIV is down. Neither of these are really, or it is especially HIV is contributed by the program, but it's attributed to that, claimed for that, and thereby there will be strengthening of the program. But the surprising part, the missing is the flagship program, which was NRHM, is completely missing. It's not there even in the Congress manifesto. And if one tries to figure out why that should be so, the fact that the NRHM became a public system strengthening program, rather than what they had initially conceptualized, something which would mean people would have better access, and better access would mean insurance system, private sector, and so on. It got turned around, and therefore now they don't even want to talk about that program. So even they don't claim it. The only manifesto where it comes in is the BJP, which says it was a failure. The others, none of them talk about it. So, and then the third, it talks about insurance, RSBY being strengthened, and RSBY one critique being it's only for hospitalization. So they say we take it across the board from private, primary, secondary, and tertiary care. We'll expand it to that, which means that you will now have private sector being paid public funds at secondary and primary level also, through expansion of RSBY. So, without saying that there is this kind of a mixed approach, that's what it boils down to. And then it talks about direct benefit transfer. So instead of direct credit transfer, cash transfer, the word has become benefit, but that is sort of the overall approach. There is a promise to increase health expenditure to 3%. That was their promise for the first UPA in the Common Minimum Program with the left. So that has not been achieved yet, and so that's the commitment made again. Concretes in terms of strengthening the public system is only made in terms of filling vacancies, and a statement which again is sort of shows thoughtlessness, creating 60 new jobs by expanding education. How do you expand jobs by expanding education? You create more people with that, but you don't necessarily have vacancies for them. So the two don't make any logical sense. It doesn't even talk about the high-level expert group of the Planning Commission on Universal Access to Healthcare and so on, where again one sees because that had denied the use of insurance systems. It very systematically has brought out how the world over experiences that insurance systems do not work. And the HLEG Planning Commission report actually says that. Therefore, that again is wiped out of any cognizance. Two things which don't figure at all: private sector regulation. So there's nothing on what that will do. And two, there is no mention of traditional medicine, Ayush, anything at all. These are two glaring silences. If one looks at BJP, again, many of things are similar. Telemedicine and e-governance. Instead of insurance, they call it now health assurance. And they talk of setting up a health assurance mission. They've talked of several, what they call new. They say that now 2002 was the health policy, that the last health policy, so now we'll have a new health policy. But they don't spell out anything about that. They talk of new missions without talking of the NRHM and calling it a failure. Then something called the National Mosquito Control Mission. What does that mean? You have a whole vector-borne control program, which is what has been there forever. So how is that going to be different? A program for women's health care. Your whole RCH programs, etc., are all geared and focused on that, but this again, so they're just using these new terminologies. The focus, there is no mention of primary care. The entire thing is about AIIMS in every district, an AIIMS-like hospital in every district, strengthening hospitals with latest technology. So the focus is again on these parts, and an overarching professional regulatory body with increasing the educational infrastructure for medical education. And a large part of that is private sector. Again, one mention of converging health, food, nutrition, and pharma sector. Now, this makes perfect sense. We'd all like to see that happen, but it doesn't seem to have thought out here, because they say in the Department of Health we converge these three. The three are in three different ministries, and therefore that's a different order of things altogether than from saying we put them together in a ministry. There is. The last thing which they do have is talk of traditional medicine, but they do it in their own way, which is expected. They talk of yoga and Ayurveda. Only one mention of Ayurveda, and back to Ayurveda again. So Ayurveda is the only traditional medicine that they can see. The Herbal Medicinal Board, which is sort of more the folk practice centered thing, where is mentioned, but again it's mentioned wrong. The terminology, it's the National Medicinal Plant Board, they call it a Herbal Plant Board. So there's really the lack of knowledge and things comes through in all the writing that is there. And somewhere there seems to be what has been alleged, that there's been copy-paste. There is ecosystem development on terms which are there in other manifestos, so whether that is there. There is no mention of rights at all anywhere in the healthcare thing, and which has become so much part today. Two, there is no mention of essential drugs and the pharma industry, which Congress has promised and which is now so much in public discourse. It's not mentioned at all. If we come to the CPM manifesto, it has a very substantive section on health, apps completely focused on strengthening public sector, and it gives very concrete measures for that. Also for the pharma industry, how to regulate prices, how to strengthen back again and revive the public sector pharma industry. But what one sees in this is two of the things which seem to be missing, especially if there is a focus on the strengthening of public system. The major barrier to public system strengthening is the fact that you don't have doctors coming into your system. that's an issue not addressed at all. So then how do you expect it to happen? There is no focus or differentiation between primary, secondary, tertiary. Where would the focus be? And somebody who's addressing so much the public sector, this needs to be there. Private sector, there's a strong statement. It says regulating the private sector healthcare, especially the corporate-owned hospital sector, through urgent and stringent measures. But that's really a big question mark because nobody knows how to regulate that sector, which is so completely unregulated, and so that again remains. And the big silence is there is nothing on traditional medicine. This just doesn't exist as if there's no knowledge that existed before modern science came in. AAP has, well, as I said, immediately after Swaraj, the first issues are education and health. And that was part of some of the discussion that happened earlier in their policy discussions. The section that they do have talks of this, similar things of universal access to healthcare, but it makes explicit strengthening public system. It gives concretely what the private sector, which is a very weak way of regulation, it's not very strong on it, but it says improve accountability by the patient's charter being demanded and being implemented and enforcing that. Also the improve accountability of public systems through the Swaraj model of Mohalla Samitis and other forms of community monitoring. They do talk about the traditional systems and about local health tradition, which means not only the codified systems but also the folk practices and so on. So the knowledge, local knowledge is somewhere recognized. So they have these, it's a much shorter section, 5 almost bullet points, but it seems to be the most comprehensive in terms of covering public, private, talks about the health resources and the human resources needed for the health system, and about traditional medicine, all put into one short frame. The concretes, of course, need to be sharpened much more, so that goes. What the CPM also demanded has committed to is a 5% of the budget, which is beyond what the others have committed earlier. Other than this, there are small bits about health under agriculture, or under workers' rights, and so on, as well as each of the section on SC, ST, OBC, disabled, elderly has one thing about health. So when you search health, you'll find it in 15 places, at least in 2 or 3 of these documents, which is, I think, a little more than where it used to be earlier. So there is greater emphasis, but the concretes are missing, and the specific experience of NRHM, which is our current public system strengthening model, is not there in the 4, except for having been called a failure.
Except?
So that's really the state of where we are, that the desire for public system strengthening is there, and yet the concretes are not being shown up at all. Private sector continues to be very much there, but the differences, then ideological differences across the 4 come out very clearly in the way the 4 have put out their health sections.
Thank you, Rishi. Thank you for the comments. We'll come back to you once more again when we wind up in terms of seeking your inputs on how this engagement can be furthered and what next will be a meaningful step to do. So now, here on tribal communities issue.
Thanks. I'd like to short here because already time. To start with, I would be rather focusing on tribal issues at this central level, the Adivasi community, because the issues which we have tried to look into are not very specific to Northeast tribal groups. To start with, if we see